welcome to the land of saints and sinners. Today you're with the Three Musketeers, which is
Richie Taylor,
Clark,
and me, Jojo. Nice to have you with us, and today we have something that we feel is quite important to talk about, which is May the 1st, and that is the local elections.
I mean, the question is, are they important? Because when you think about, most people think about the general election, don't they? You know, the MPs, Westminster. In Wales, of course, we have the Senate elections because devolution, and in Scotland, Northern Ireland. But the local elections are important because they're the ones who take your bins out. They determine your council tax, whether, you know, the police come to your door on time, because that's where the money comes from. It's local government money that's given from Westminster for public services in your town, your constituency, in your area. And your councillor represents you. So council elections are important for a whole number of reasons, Clark.
They are. I think council elections, they probably have more influence on your life and quality of life than the actual general election, because your day-to-day living, your bin's getting taken out, whether your streets are clean, you know, they have a say in your education. If you've got old people, social care, that's what they're there to do. They're there to provide those services. So they do have a really, really big important part to play. And also, it costs you a lot of money. You know, you're paying a lot of money in your council tax for services like your roads and potholes and all of those things. So, you know, if you want leisure services in your town, they want them to be of good, high quality standard and meets your needs, your children's needs. That's what your council tax goes to pay for. So they are really, really important.
But the turnout for council elections are quite low when they compared to like most elections. We know that. And I think these elections are very important for one very good reason, Jojo, aren't they?
They are.
They are. And that reason is that, of course, it's going to be an indicator of what's to come, because it's almost a litmus test for the future, which in 2029 is the big general election. And as you know, on this show, we're not a fan of Keir Starmer.
We're absolutely not.
Jojo,
how do we get him out?
Yeah, we will always work. We're still working on that one. We're going to come up with a plan.
But do you know what? This is actually the first step of the plan, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it gives people the opportunity to go out and give a sentiment as to what they're feeling, as to how well they think the government has performed. You know, whether the manifesto pledge of freezing council tax has been kept or not. And they can go out on the 1st of May, where they're lucky enough to be having elections, because not all the local elections are being held this year that should be held this year. But they can go out and they can send a message to the government and to the parties, the MPs, and say, listen, we're not happy. You've broken your manifesto pledge. You certainly put our council tax up. And we're gonna show you by returning a vote on someone other than a Labour candidate.
Did my dad vote for Labour?
No, your dad's a true blue. He's a conservative.
He is, isn't he?
He's an out-and-out conservative.
Because we asked him yesterday, didn't we? We said to him, who are you going to vote for? And that is like a pertinent question.
Yeah.
Who are we going to vote for?
Well, I mean, who are you going to vote for? Do you know?
I'm not voting. I'm in Wales, baby.
Oh yeah, we're in Wales.
I'm in Wales.
Yes, we're in Wales. I forget because we're on the board, don't we? So, so a lot of the elections have been cancelled, and
yours too.
Well, I don't think they were having. It was never down for local elections in Solihull.
Solihull, no.
Yeah.
But I think there's a reason for that, though. And we discussed it in the car on the way to the studio. That, of course, reform is becoming a massive pain in the arse of people. Especially the Uni Party, the Conservatives and Labour. They're like, you know, they know what's going on. The momentum is building, the attacks he's coming under in the party. Now, there'll be people watching in this podcast today. Some will love Farage, some are not sure of him, and some will hate him. Hey, but listen, we've got to look at the bigger picture here. And I think what Reform are doing, they're taking from the playbook of the Lib Dems, because they've always had a strong ground game in these local elections, which is then fed into the general election, hence why they got less votes than Reform in 2024 in July, but ended up with over 70 MPs, whereas Reform had 4 million votes, way more than Lib Dems, ended up with 4 or 5 MPs. I mean, we know the system is, I don't like the system of first past the post. I'd rather proportional representation, but that's what we're stuck with. But they're cancelling these elections in areas where Reform came second to Labour very narrowly in the general election. So I think it's been a deliberate setup by the government to cancel some of these issues over devolution, because of devolved powers, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, devolution, for those that don't know, it's basically making the authorities bigger. And the idea is that by making bigger authorities, by combining local authorities into one larger authority, you can get more value for money. You won't be duplicating services. But it has been shown over time, and I think there's a lot of studies that have been done on this, that actually to more effective services, whilst it might be a little bit more expensive, but more effective for the people on the ground, is by having smaller local authorities. The most effective councils are parish councils. They're the ones that have a really, really big influence over what happens, what gets spent, and how the parish looks and runs, whether, you know.
It reminds me of the scene of Vicar and Dibley, with all sat on the table. No, Vicar, yeah. Oh, Vicar, I give it to you, Vicar, I give it to you. Oh, yes, Vicar.
But it's true that
That's going to cut, yeah, I mean, yeah.
But like, if you're putting a planning application in for an extension or what have you, that parish council is going to decide whether you're going to have it or not. And that's the important thing, is like the more local it goes, the more personal it gets. And so by making it bigger, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get better services, because you only have to look at large industry. Look at the big conglomerate supermarkets and what have you. Do we actually get cheaper prices by them, or are they actually making more money from you? Local authorities, by being bigger, that's what they're scared of. It's part of that whole thing of moving away from smaller authorities, just the same as they would like us to be part of Europe, which is a bigger authority, which again goes into another argument about globalism and all of that control.
So I've been looking at the Labour side on Twitter, and there's quite a lot of things that they've been saying. So the Tories are plotting a grubby backroom deal with Nigel Farage. The only way working people can secure change in your community is by voting Labour on Thursday, the 1st of May. Don't risk a Tory reform pact. How do you both think about that?
Well, it's never going to happen. Nigel Farage, who I know and have spoken to many times, been on his campaign trail as well, I can tell you that it will never happen, because the Tories screwed him over during the Brexit vote when he was leading the Brexit party. Because they try to broker a deal to step some candidates down, so it's kind of political, bartering and all that kind of stuff. And he vowed that they never do a deals with the Tories. So this is Labour's playbook, but they're trying to use this to get people to vote for them, because they're saying, listen, Conservatives failed for 14 years. If you vote for Reform or Conservatives, you're going to get the same. So stick with us for the long haul. We know Keir Starmer has screwed things up in the first, since July he's been in power, not even a year yet. And so they're afraid, they are absolutely petrified of the rise of Reform. They are in every single poll, they're smashing it. And they're on course to win so many seats. I think over 400 seats, I think, has been predicted. And some councils of I think it's 98, is it, councils? I'm not sure the full number, Clark. But it's clear to me both the Conservatives and Labour are attacking Nigel Farage. And Farage always used this expression. He said, you're getting nearer to the target when the enemy is throwing everything at you, the kitchen sink. And that's what they're doing, because they know, and they're shit scared, because they know that Reform is coming after them.
I think Kemi Badenoch as well, it'd be a very bad move for her. I can see why it's attractive to her, because they are leaking votes. It's her leadership and stewardship of the Conservative Party hasn't seen that thrust of support, and her performances in Westminster haven't gone down that well with the voters. So we're not seeing this rush of support that you would expect for such a poor performing government. We're not seeing that support going to the Conservatives, which naturally in the past it would. So I think Kemi Badenoch has got a very, very difficult position, in that if she does align with Reform, she's potentially going to lose more voters to Reform, because they're taking up what would be seen as the traditional Conservative values, especially in the older voters, being tough on crime, tough on immigration and things like that, justice, all of those things that the Conservatives traditionally were renowned for is what Reform's standing for. And by doing alliances with them, she's more likely to lose more votes to them and put her in a weaker position.
Another attack from Labour is telling them if you vote Lib Dem or Green, it risks more chaos with Farage's party and the Conservatives. So they're really trying to attack him, like you said, in every angle.
Well, that's Labour being very scared of splitting the vote, because I think they won a lot of seats in the general election on the basis that Lib Dem and Green voters where they thought their candidate wasn't going to get in. They lent their vote to Labour to get the Tories out. And they've been let down by it. So I can't, again, Labour are very, very scared that those voters are going to go back to Lib Dem and Greens. And I think the Lib Dems, more than anything, are going to benefit from that. I think Greens is a difficult vote, whilst they're very socialist. When you look, I think they run Brighton Council, and that's been nothing but a shambles, really. The bins have been an absolute nightmare. They can't agree on what needs recycling and what doesn't need recycling. So there's been a lot of animosity down there towards the way the council's been run since Brighton City Council went green.
I think the Conservatives are done. They're done. Their ship has sailed. And Farage has taken the centre-right ground, and he is mopping up and cleaning up. Their only salvation with the Conservative Party would be Robert Jenrick, in my opinion. I think he's closest to conservatism than anybody else currently in the party. And Farage is aware of that because he's very Farage-like. If you listen to where he speaks on mass, immigration and stuff like that, and all the subject matters that people get angry about, the Farage taps into. He taps into the anger in the nation, doesn't he? And he pulls on that, and he says, "Listen, if you don't like this, you can vote for change, vote for us, vote for reform, vote for change." And I think with him talking about Britain being broken is I know there's a lot of you've worked in politics, Clark. A lot of PR people, they get advisors around them. What slogans shall we have? What's going to be our strap line? What's going to be our selling point? And I think that idea, Britain is broken, is genius. It's simple, but it's true. Our country is broken. The NHS is broken. Public services is broken. But bring it back to local elections, because Jojo, you were talking in the car about, why is Farage being attacked like this? For the simple reason, obviously, there's a fear between Conservatives and the Labour Party, because Conservatives have been attacking him as well. They've been very blatant on their social media platforms because they know that this is a precursor for the general election. So it depends on how well each party does in these general local elections. Then it's not a crystal ball. It's not a given that they'll win the next general election.
This sets the strategy,
but it's like a midterm. It's a midterm. So
is there any truth in their attacks? I mean, like one of the attacks was about the NHS, wasn't it? About him privatising it. So I think, whilst Labour are saying these are his words, not ours, do not trust him. Like, what do you think?
Well, I think with privatisation in the NHS, we've already got private companies coming into the NHS, right? Not just agency workers. We got, it's been privatised for ages since Tony Blair back in the early 90s.
GP practices are privatised. They're all separate businesses. They've got contracts with the NHS.
Yeah, the PFIs. But you think of it like this, right? If you need a brain surgeon and there's no one available on the NHS, but you can bring someone in private, what would you do? Farage's point is this, and it's very important people get this. He says, for those who can afford to pay an insurance-based system, so if my salary allows me to pay for healthcare, then I should pay. Right? And in that, it gives me then the guarantee that I'll get seen to. So it takes pressure off the NHS because there's more funding coming in for it. But for people who can't afford it, they don't have to pay. He has made that clear on Question Time, Laurel Kunsberg's show, Politics Hub. He's been on TV so many times. But they always try, and they frighten people to tell people, if you vote Farage, you won't get to see your doctor. Guess what? You can't get to see your doctor now. Yeah. Never mind if Farage gets
join
in.
the 8 o'clock stampede.
Yeah, number 174 in the queue. Yeah. And I think what they're doing is they're throwing the mud at Farage as much as possible, hoping for some of it to stick, because they know that he's making progress and he's speaking right into the heart of the nation, and people are listening to him, even young people, and saying, you know what, I don't agree with anything he says, but we're going to vote for him because there's no other alternative.
I think the thing that I'm going to be looking out for in these elections, though, as well as that, because I think, it's beyond a binary Reform, Labour choice or Conservative choice, is the rise of the independent candidates.
Yeah.
There's a lot of independent people standing out there now that are disillusioned, and they've gone, I'm going to stand up for my local people on a local ballot.
This is our Councillor Jacob Williamson.
Yeah.
What a legend.
But Jacob, his friend as well, followed him. But there have been many defections prior to this election. A lot of people, I know in Wales certainly, a lot of Welsh councillors have gone over to Reform. They've abdicated their parties, whether they were independents or Labour, and they've gone to join other parties. And that's happened prior to these elections being called. And Jacob was a perfect example of someone who believes in principle, standing up for his right for his constituents. And that's a big thing, to turn your back on a party that you supported.
The support that they give you as well, especially for elections, electioneering, leafleting and all the rest of it, by taking an independent stance and doing that is a big, bold move. But I think the interesting thing as well is that be interesting to see how they do on a local level and how that will then translate in 4 years' time, because there's a lot of Labour MPs out there that Wes Streeting in Ilford, he's had independent candidates pretty vocal and has got a very small majority now. I think it's around about 5,000. That can easily go. And what's Jess Phillips in Birmingham as well? Yeah. She was up against independent candidates that again are potentially going to do. The guy in Leicester as well, that he lost his seat to an independent candidate. And whilst they are mainly religious-based parties that they're going for, it shows how precarious that independent vote can be. And on the local level, where you can win a seat in the council with maybe 1,000, 1,100 votes, when you've got this indecision over whether you're going to vote for Labour, Green, Liberal, an independent candidate can come in and get in with 600, 700, 800 votes with very, very little votes. Yeah. So then that puts the power on them when they're sitting in the council chamber and a deal needs to be done because there's no overall control. Those parties are then going to be having to cut a deal with these independents, and it puts them in a very powerful position, which will hopefully translate to the people on the ground and the local people on the ground getting better services and having their council tax spent the way that they want it.
I think it's important, though, that people look at what Labour have failed to deliver since the election. It's clear that they have failed the people because they've reneged on so many of their promises. I mean, we're not going to list them here. I mean, most people watching this probably will know some of them, but there's some on the other side saying, no, they've kept some of their promises. But look, anybody with half a brain cell will know that they've reneged on a lot of them. They might twist their words and everything else, but we know what's happened. And I think that's going to be fed down to the local elections and the rise and the popularism of the Farage movement, if you like. And it is seen as a protest vote, but I think it's more than that. I think the concern people have, although the local elections are just that, they're not Westminster, not general election, but it's an indication of where we're going, the trajectory, if you like, of politics. People are concerned, like, has Farage got the ability to govern? Because, he's never been in that position. That was a question, Giorgio, you raised.
I asked that earlier. Like, how do we know? I think it's at the moment we're all kind of in this position of, okay, he's never led, the country before. What do we do? Do we trust him? But then, Keir Starmer hadn't either. I said his name right.
Yeah.
I was saying it was
Sneaky
really
Starmer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Weird Starmer.
We had
slippery Starmer.
Slippery.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the way to judge Farage will be as to how well did he perform when he was in the EU Parliament. That's he was the leader of the Brexit party in the EU Parliament. How well did he do there? Did he ask the right questions? Did he act well? Did he lead the party well there? That's the only thing that we've got to go on. His performances as an MP, don't know. I'm undecided. I don't think he's really been as the powerful person that we were anticipating.
Well, I think it finished to him, though.
Was probably the one that took more of the limelight.
But trying to not defending him here because I'm neutral, obviously for the podcast and everything else. But I've had my dealings with Nigel and the party in the past. But I think being the leader of a party and being an MP is a bit different just being an MP of a constituency. So he's the MP of Clacton on Sea, right? So, but as a leader of a party, he's travelling around the country to get support, to get voters. So he can't be in Clacton 24/7. And I think Labour and Conservatives use that against him. Well, he's not being in Clacton. I've seen it now. So Commons in the debates, they mock him in there. The amount of times he's been mocked in there, but it's working in his favour. Because the people are watching it. It happened in the European Parliament. He was in there for 2 decades, over 20 years he served there, right, as an MEP. And that famous phrase he's known for, you all laughed, you're not laughing now, were you? Because we voted to leave, 17.4, to leave the European Union. So he was successful in what he tried to do. He's a successful businessman. He knows his maths, if you like, which we're not very good at, certainly I'm
terrible.
But, he knows business. And you need people with a business acumen to be able to lead the country. You need some kind of level, not Rachel from accounts, for goodness sake. So you can get a job in Asda now.
I think that this is where the local elections are going to be really important to give that bellwether. It will set strategies for the next 4 years. It will probably change the direction for a number of parties. And I think the other thing is, and we can't ignore the fact that on the 1st of May, we've got a by-election as well.
Yeah, of course, in Runcorn, innit?
Yeah.
We've got a by-election, and that's massive because that's the first one of this Parliament where Mike Gainsbury, the guy who punched crap out of that guy to the pub, obviously lost his seat and everything else. Well, by-election was called, obviously. That's going to be a big litmus test as well to see if Reform, because I mean they're neck and neck with Labour at the moment. I think on that.
That graph,
yeah.
And that'll be interesting as well to see on the 1st of May as to how the people that generally vote for Lib Dems and Greens, where they spend their vote. And, where they lend their vote.
I'm sorry to be. I just tell you the truth. I think the Green Party are a waste of space. Like, I mean,
my uncle wrote the manifesto.
Well, that's fine, but I'm talking about the party, not your uncle. They're a waste of
You can
space.
say they're a waste of space, but I think what you've got to take into account.
How many MPs have they got? How many MPs have they got?
One, haven't they? No, it's two. I think they've got two now. But you say that.
How many votes do they get? How many vote share do they get?
An important part in the fact that many people who are disillusioned with the Labour Party have gone to the Green Party because of the more socialist principles. So you had a lot that were on the left of the Labour Party that have gone Green because they see them as a socialist party, and therefore it's about splitting and diminishing that vote. Now this is where it becomes really, really important, because people will turn around and they go, "I've always voted Labour all my life, but I can't vote Tory and I can't vote Reform. And I don't want to vote Lib Dem because I don't know what they stand for, and they let the students down when they had the opportunity to do something." They will lend the vote to the Green Party.
So the Green Party that supports having trans rights and everything else over women's rights. It's mad, and it's crazy.
No, it is madness. Yeah. But then people will vote for them just on the basis that I'm going to go and vote, but I don't want to vote for any of the others. So they use it as a protest vote, and that's where it makes them significant. So there will be people out there that will lend their vote to the Greens just purely out of protest, and it'd be interesting to see when they talk about swings, what the swings from one party to another will be. And that's where in this by-election there will be a lot of traditional voters, I think, that vote for Labour or Conservative that are going to change their vote.
Well, as a non-gambling man, I reckon within 2 more parliaments the Green Party be gone. They won't even be in Westminster. That's me. We can put some odds on that, Clark, later. Maybe.
Probably.
But on the flip side, I've seen people stating that look, Labour haven't even been in that long, and look, give them a chance. Like they have actually done what they said they would do. So, I don't think they have. You guys don't think they have. So where are people getting that they are actually sticking to the manifesto and the promises that they've given?
I don't know. I mean, we did a TikTok live earlier, and someone said that they were going to vote Labour in the next election. I don't know where they were, but for the local elections, don't know where they were. By all means, if that's how you want to spend your vote, fine. But the people that I'm talking to, very, very few traditional Labour voters are actually turning around and saying that they are going to vote Labour because they feel as though they've been let down on the promises made in the manifesto. They didn't buy the fact that that taxes haven't gone up on the working man because of the national insurance contributions. Yeah. They've seen through that. They knew it was a tax that's ended up hitting the worker in the pocket, and inflation's gone through the roof. They're disillusioned because of the winter fuel payments. The council tax freezes. Very, very few people. I'd love to know if anyone can tell us whose council tax didn't go up out there. I think everyone's council tax went up.
Yeah.
And again, they said they were going to get tough on migration, and they're putting out a lot of information about migration, saying we've returned X amount of people, what have you. That maybe they have, but people are still seeing the boats landing, and that's what they were intending to do. And they're not seeing Labour leading on the world stage, commanding the world stage as they hoped they would.
Nigel Farage is winning the hearts of the nation.
Why is he?
I'm going to come to that now. Yeah, I really believe he's doing it. He's tapped into the frustration, the anger, and the anxiety of the people of this country, because we've seen the Uni Party run the country since we've ever known democracy. And what have we been left with? Britain is broken, right? We can go through a whole list of it. I mentioned earlier, I know it was on TikTok or on our podcast tonight. Labour or Conservatives are not the answer. So the question is, if Reform do eventually, after these local elections we've been talking about, but we're going a step further, which is fine. If this is a test right now and Farage does poll, not just in the polls, but it does translate into votes and they win a huge amount of seats, it will send a clear message to people who don't normally vote, those who are apathetic about voting, or those who are not happy with Conservative or Labour. So they will garner more support, more voters than they are now. They had 4 million in the last general election, which is more than the Lib Dems had, because of under PR, we went under first past the post, we ended up with less MPs, which I mentioned on the TikTok, I think, not this podcast. So I honestly believe that Farage has got one hell of a chance of becoming the next Prime Minister of this country. Now, whether I agree with the way he's treated some of his, close allies like Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib, who are friends of mine as well, whether I agree with how that's been handled I got my own personal opinion, and I've spoken to them privately. But the issue for me is what we currently have right now in our country is the opportunity to have something different from what we've always had. And that's attractive to people because, for even the younger generation and their reach and their social media platforms are absolutely, the people who run it behind the scenes are phenomenal. They're very clever. Nigel has always been good at reading the political tea leaves. He knows when to say something, when not to say something, to jump onto something, when not to jump onto something. And I think the fear that the other parties have is they know that he is touching a nerve, or he is at least scratching an itch that people have that they are failing to do. For example, mentioned the boats, immigration, which is a massive thing, right? The economy is first, the NHS, and then migration up there, the top three. Mm-hmm. He has already said in a press conference earlier, what day are we on? Earlier
on Monday.
Earlier last week, he held a press conference in London and he made it clear within the Home Office department, he would create a separate office, completely separate, funded as well, that would deal with illegal immigration, which we don't currently have. It's all done through like the Home Office, Foreign Affairs, wherever it's Clark, isn't it? Or Home Office, really.
Home Office.
They deal with it, right? And it's full of junior civil servants, most of them. Mm-hmm. There's some older people there as well. They haven't got a handle on it. They've lost all control. We have got mass immigration in this country that is radically changing our country, and it's not for the better, it's for the worse. And I think Farage has recognised that. He's been on about migration for years, as we know.
But wasn't he branded a racist? So my point is, for the people who have been a bit kind of nervous about Farage, is because the old school were thinking that he was a racist, and we were all doors open and welcoming.
I think again, you take it down to a local level, and you look at the protests that were had last summer. And on a local level, people are turning around and they are fearful of what's happening to their communities. I think that people are beginning to question whether it's as Richie's saying about, most people will give comfort to people, they'll help support people, but there is a limit to how much that we can do. I don't think people are inherently racist, and I think that's what the narrative that's been pushed by Labour and some of the mainstream politicians and the media, that if you want to stop the boats, you're being racist. I think people are seeing through that. They're not being racist. They're turning around and saying, hang on a minute, this influx of people is making the health service worse because it's harder to get a doctor's appointment, trying to get a council house. I've been on the waiting list for X amount of years. And now you're talking about putting another 150, 200 people into our community that's just going to put extra stress on those services. So people are looking at a local level, and I think the protests have been done on a local level on the basis of being overwhelmed in terms of the services and getting less for what they're putting in, as opposed to it being a position of colour. I think that's where most people are coming from.
Which is what you say. It's not
it's
about capacity.
Yeah, and it's not about the colour of your skin. I just don't want them here. I don't want these people in our country. They're not adding any value. The Windrush generation were different. People will, go back to the Windrush. Completely different. Not the same at all whatsoever. We brought them here. We invite, we needed them. Absolutely. People. And they contributed to our country and nation in an incredible way. Absolutely. But what we're seeing right now is an invasion of our country from fighting age men, males, not females and children, coming over on boats every single day and being welcomed by the RNLI, which I know is a charity, but obviously people are giving money to that charity, that ferry them in, and now British Border Force is doing the same as well. Bring them in, put them in hotels, costing £600 to £700 million a day, not a week, a day, to house these migrants. Okay, there's years of processing. Many of them leave the hotels. They get here, they're given a mobile phone. They're given accommodation for free. Some would say, well, they get £7 a day. Yeah, but they get £7 a day, but they've got no bills. I know there are families out there watching this today who struggle day after day to put food on the table for their children, frightened of their children going to school because migrants live in their area. There was a village in Wales with about 3,000 people. This was going back, I think it was last year. And they put more migrants, it was percentage-wise, about 400 or 500 migrants into that village, and they moved them in the end to a military base. We had it in Llanelli. We had a Stry Park Hotel, which was well documented all across the news as well. They put migrants there. Protesters stayed out there till they got them out. So we can get them out. They put them somewhere else because they didn't want them. Do you know where they put them? The hotel, by the schools and the park where children are. And I as a parent, I have issues with that when I consider what the rather grooming gangs have done. And these are from a certain ethnicity. I'll say it as it is. I don't want them here. I want them out of our country. We're a Christian nation, and if they don't want to be part of our Christian heritage, they shouldn't be here. Simple as that. That's my position.
I think, again, just bringing it back to a local level, and I think these are the issues that people want to be raised. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear from anyone who's watching and listening, or via the X platform, as to what's going on the ground where they've got elections, what the campaigning's been like, whether that's an issue, whether there's people been out there knocking on doors, what's being said on the doors. From what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, the campaigners that are going out over these local elections, a lot of the Labour people are turning around and are very, very scared because they're getting a huge anti-Starmer sentiment out there. Yeah. And they're feeding that back through. And I think, again, we mentioned it earlier, is that there are some good councillors out there, Jacob Williamson being one, I'm sure, a man of integrity. Yeah. But there will be others like him as well that are seriously challenged by that have been going out and doing good work for all their constituents. And they're going to potentially lose their seats. And it'd be councillors like that are really sort of like, the ones that we want to keep and not the ones that we want to lose. And that's what they're getting on the door. From people that I know that have been campaigning on the Conservative side, they're getting the same. That they're getting, they're not convinced by Kemi Badenoch and what she's saying and how and her vision for the country. So they're talking about national issues on the doorstep. Whereas when you're talking about local elections, it really should be about where's the council tax going? Why are my bills going up? Why are you only collecting my bin every 3 weeks now? Why are the potholes? Why aren't the streets cleaned? Why is there still graffiti? Why is the dog shit still on the pavement? Why the parks? The swings aren't being repaired and I want to take the kids out. The swimming pools are closing. The libraries are closing. Those are the things that people should be talking about on the doorstep and getting their councillors to support them with. But they're not. They're being swayed by these local issues.
So if people
national issues
don't know who to vote for or don't want to vote, we can't really waste those votes, can we?
No, I think, again, your favourite question of the day, Jojo, how do we get rid of Starmer? Yeah. So this is part of that process. I think the message will be heard, and it will be, if it's as hard as it could be, it won't be as that bad, because the seats in which the real bellwether, the real test would be, they're no longer having elections there because they the jiggery pokery with the devolution of the local authorities.
Demolition.
But the actual, if it's a devastating impact, Starmer will have a lot of questions to ask for. He will probably still hang on, but he will be under a lot of pressure. And I think this is the message that needs to go out to them. They will turn around, I guarantee, on May the 2nd, they'll be turning around and say, oh, well, no government does well in local elections, midterm elections and all the rest of it. That's what they'll be saying. But behind the scenes, they'll be turning around and saying, you've got to do something and you've got to do something quick. And it'll be interesting to see how well he listens, because there's going to be a lot of MPs out there that will see the votes going on in their in those wards that will reflect how the vote's going to go in their constituencies. And they will be seeing some of them with majorities of maybe 6,000, 7,000, which is relatively safe. They need quite a big swing to get rid of it. They will be very, very worried, and they will be putting the pressure on the main party. And the conference season is going to be very, very interesting after this.
I mean, the thing is with Farage as well, he doesn't do the conference season alone. He travels around the country, packs out venues with thousands of people. Birmingham, perfect example, more recently, and other places around these, red wall areas, conservative areas as well. And And I noticed that their membership has gone from like 80,000 to 250,000. They've overtaken the Conservative Party. So there are more members of Reform now, paid up members. What do you make of their membership is another thing, obviously. But they've got more members than the Conservative Party. And the Conservatives are finished, as far as I'm concerned. They're a busted flush. They're a turd that won't go down the plan. They're going to keep it going. They are. They're a busted flush. And I think that Farage, and this is why there's talk of a pact, and he's made it very clear there is no pact happening. They crapped on him during the election, the last general election, not the last one before, when they tried to broker it around the Brexit time. They said, we'll stand candidates down, his political, footballing and stuff like that. And Farage, there's no way on God's green earth, and I don't know him, intimately, but I know him enough to know him to say to people, listen, he is not going to make a pact with the Conservatives. Even if it meant getting rid of Labour, he wouldn't do it.
So we want to know who you're going to vote for, and how many days is it now to the 1st of May?
Only a few days away, isn't it? A few days away. So.
It's nerve-wracking.
3 days.
Yeah,
it's going to be a big indication of what's going to happen in the general election.
It is, absolutely is. Well, look, thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for sitting with us and being patient with us and our ramblings. But we will see you next week.